It was just after 8:45 a.m. when Ava stepped into the glass-fronted corporate lobby of Vantage Tech, clutching a folder of her resume and credentials. Dressed in a sleek navy suit and modest heels, she exuded professionalism, but the moment she walked in, she felt it. The eyes, the subtle shifts in posture, the hushed whispers behind the reception desk. She had arrived early for her interview, 10 minutes early, in fact. But instead of being greeted with a smile, the receptionist glanced up, gave her a once-over, and pursed her lips. "Are you making a delivery?" the receptionist asked, not bothering to hide her disinterest. Ava blinked, slightly stunned. "No, I have an interview." Ava Brooks. "I was scheduled to meet with the talent acquisition team at 9 a.m. The receptionist didn't even check the schedule. "Take a seat over there," she said, gesturing vaguely to the far corner of the waiting area, near the janitor's closet, far from the cluster of fresh-faced candidates seated by the conference room. Ava took a breath, swallowing her pride, and quietly moved to the seat. She caught glimpses of a young white woman being offered coffee. Another candidate was led into an office for a pre-interview chat with HR. No one called her. No one looked her way. Then it happened. One of the junior associates, a man in a checkered shirt, walked past Ava, turned around, and smirked. Loud enough for several others to hear, he said to another employee, "Who let housekeeping in?" A burst of laughter followed. Ava looked down. She didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, is that Ava wasn't just anyone. She wasn't just a candidate. She wasn't just a name on a resume. She was the wife of the man who owned 80% of their company stock. Exactly 9 minutes later, the atmosphere in the office changed entirely. Doors opened. People straightened their backs. A sharp click of leather shoes echoed across the polished marble floor as Julian Brooks, CEO of Vantage Tech and one of the youngest self-made black billionaires in the country, stepped into the lobby. The same receptionist who had dismissed Ava practically jumped from her seat. "Mr. Brooks, we didn't know you were coming today." Julian's gaze swept the room, then landed on Ava. His expression softened. "Sweetheart," he said, walking straight to her and taking her hand. "I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic." Gasps. Audible, stunned gasps. The receptionist paled. The associate who made the housekeeping joke suddenly tried to vanish behind a potted plant. Julian turned to the staff, his voice calm but cold. "My wife was here for an interview." Instead, she was ignored, ridiculed, and disrespected. His eyes locked onto the receptionist. "Is this how we treat black women who walk through our doors? Is this how we assess potential talent? By the shade of their skin or the cut of their clothes?" Silence. "I built this company with the idea that diversity wasn't just a checkbox, but a necessity, that people of all backgrounds should be treated with respect." He paused. "Clearly, we've lost that." Julian turned to Ava. "Come with me," he said. "You won't be needing an interview." He led her past the frozen faces, straight into the executive wing. Later that afternoon, the receptionist was gone. So was the smirking associate. HR had been summoned to restructure onboarding protocol, and unconscious bias training was made mandatory company-wide. But more importantly, Ava didn't just get a job. She became Director of Strategic Inclusion, responsible for making sure what happened to her never happened again. She walked back into that office a week later, holding her head high, not as an applicant, but as a leader, and every single person who had laughed or looked past her now had to report to her. Ava sat in her new corner office, the skyline of the city glinting through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The glass glowed with the morning sun, casting a soft light across a mahogany desk. But she wasn't focused on the view. She was thinking, remembering. Her inbox buzzed with new messages, welcome emails, meeting requests, project updates. But her mind drifted back to that day. The stays, the laughter, the quiet pain she had to swallow before Julian walked in. That humiliation had burned, not because she wasn't strong, but because she had been here before. Ava had built her career twice over. Once in a startup where she was underpaid and overworked, and again after leaving it all behind to support Julian in his rise. She hadn't planned to re-enter the corporate world. But this role, this opportunity, was personal. It was a chance to change the system from the inside, and now she had the power to do it. Across the building, in a meeting room with frosted glass walls, a tense meeting was underway. HR heads, department managers, and PR officials sat around a long conference table. Julian stood at the front, arms crossed. "The footage is already on social media," he said flatly. "People saw how Ava was treated. We either show we're serious about change, or we lose trust, not just from the public, but from our own employees." A manager cleared his throat. "But sir, firing those involved, so publicly, it's creating fear in the office." Julian didn't flinch. "Fear is a good start. Accountability is better." A woman from legal shifted uneasily. "Do we announce Ava's position officially?" Julian nodded. "Immediately, and not as some token gesture. Her title comes with authority. She will have full oversight over hiring practices, advancement procedures, internal investigations, and mentorship programs. She answers only to me." Later that week, Ava held her first company-wide town hall. The main auditorium was packed. Over 600 employees in the room, hundreds more watching virtually. She stepped up to the microphone, calm but commanding. Gone was a woman who had been asked if she was making a delivery. In her place stood a professional who had fought hard to be here, and now stood for others who hadn't been given the same chance. "I won't pretend what happened to me was unique," she began, "because it wasn't. It happens every day. To people who don't have a husband in the C-suite. To women who look like me, speak like me, walk like me." A ripple of silence spread across the room. "But here's the thing. I'm not here to make anyone comfortable. I'm here to make things right. We will be creating equity, not just through training, but through action, promotions, pay audits, culture reviews, and yes, terminations where necessary." A pause. "If that scares you, good. Maybe it should." Behind closed doors, not everyone was thrilled. "I give her 6 months," one VP whispered to another. "She's too aggressive," another muttered. Julian's blinded by personal bias. But Ava wasn't concerned. She knew exactly what they thought. She'd heard it before. Too bold, too loud, too emotional. But now she had something more powerful than approval. She had authority. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Pay disparity reports were made public internally. Anonymous surveys revealed troubling feedback, and Ava acted on them. 2 directors were demoted after evidence of discriminatory hiring patterns. 3 interns from underrepresented backgrounds were promoted into training programs. The reception team was restructured with new protocols, including Ava's input. And slowly, people started looking at her differently. Not just as a CEO's wife, but as a force she truly was. One morning, as she walked into the office, the same receptionist desk was manned by someone new, a young Latina woman who stood up when Ava entered and greeted her with genuine warmth. "Good morning, Director Brooks." Ava smiled. "Good morning. How's your first week been?" "Honestly," the woman said, her eyes gleaming, "this place feels different. I feel seen." Ava placed a hand on the desk and nodded. "Good. That's exactly the point." But change never comes without resistance. A powerful board member, one who quietly disapproved of Ava's rise, began plotting behind the scenes. Whispers of conflict of interest, of disruption to company tradition, started spreading. An anonymous email to shareholders accused Ava of pushing a political agenda. Julian was furious. Ava, however, stayed calm. "I expected this," she told him. "But if they want to fight..." She looked out over the skyline, her reflection strong in the glass. Then they picked the wrong woman to underestimate. 2 months had passed. The story of Ava's first day had already become a whispered legend at Vantage Tech, shared in elevators, quiet lunch breaks, and Slack threads. But Ava hadn't come for attention. She came for transformation. And change, real change, was slow, raw, and deeply uncomfortable. In the 3rd floor executive conference room, the weekly inclusion progress meeting was underway. Ava sat at the head of the table, a sleek digital tablet in front of her. Around her sat a mixed group of department heads, diverse in race, gender, and age, though not entirely by choice. Last quarter, only 6% of leadership promotions came from underrepresented backgrounds, Ava said calmly. This, despite talent pipeline programs already being in place. A man from finance shifted in his chair. We promoted based on performance, not identity. Ava turned her gaze to him, measured but piercing. Are you suggesting the only people performing are the ones who look like you? Silence. A younger woman from marketing spoke up. I've been here 3 years. My team has the highest campaign conversion rates. My reviews are flawless, but I've never been invited to present at board meetings. Meanwhile, my junior, who joined 6 months ago, has already had 2 chances. Ava gestured toward the screen. Exactly. She wasn't here to shame anyone. She was here to show the mirror. And for the first time, many couldn't look away. That same week, Ava's initiative launched a new mentorship program, the Elevation Network. It paired rising stars with executive mentors, enforced accountability goals, and required monthly progress updates. It wasn't optional, and while some scoffed at first, results began to show. A black engineer filed a patent under the company's name for a breakthrough battery solution. A Muslim woman from logistics was promoted to regional manager after her projections saved the company millions. An openly gay data analyst created a forecasting model that now guided the company's stock strategies. The tides were turning. But not everyone was happy. Behind closed boardroom doors, Ava's name was frequently discussed, rarely with admiration. She's making enemies, muttered Richard Lang, a senior board member and old-school traditionalist. Too many waves. Another nodded. We're in the headlines for the wrong reasons. Shareholders are growing nervous. She's threatening legacy leadership, a third added, and doing it with her husband's protection. But Julian wasn't just protecting Ava. He believed in her. He had seen the invisible walls his own mother had faced in corporate America. He knew Ava was tearing those walls down, brick by brick. Still, whispers grew. A vote was quietly being planned. An attempt to remove Ava's department from the executive board. Reframe her role as advisory only. Then came the gala. Every year, Vantage Tech hosted an innovation gala. Media, investors, tech giants, all under one roof. This year, the spotlight was on Ava. Her work had increased internal retention by 40%. Diverse leadership had tripled. Revenue had grown alongside representation. Ava walked in that night wearing a tailored white suit. Beside her, Julian in black. Cameras flashed. Applause followed. But just as she took the stage to deliver her keynote, she noticed something, the empty seat. Richard Lang, missing. She began her speech anyway. I wasn't meant to stand here, Ava said. I wasn't meant to be heard. I was meant to be tolerated. Quietly, neatly, invisibly. But invisibility doesn't build empires. Visibility does. Accountability does. Equity does. Applause thundered. What happened next shocked everyone. After the gala, Ava received an email, confidential, from an intern in the IT department. It included forwarded board communications, plans to vote her out, to dissolve unnecessary noise, to reclaim the company's original identity. It was bold, sloppy, and deeply rooted in fear. Ava didn't panic. She planned. 1 week later, she walked into the boardroom carrying a folder. Inside, printouts of the leaked emails, stats of Vantage Tech has grown since her initiative began, testimonials from employees across the globe, and a resignation letter. Not hers, Richard Lang's. The board was stunned. Julian looked around the room. Richard violated multiple ethics clauses. Attempted sabotage. Ava will remain where she is, and her power will expand. From today forward, she will oversee not just inclusion, but culture, branding, and public relations. She is the voice of this company. No one objected. They couldn't. She had won. Weeks passed. One morning, Ava stood on the rooftop of Vantage Tech's headquarters, looking over the city. She breathed in the crisp morning air, her fingers lightly resting on the glass rail. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an old colleague, someone who had once told her, "You'll never make it past the lobby." The message read, "You've changed the game. You've made space for people like me. Thank you." Ava smiled, because she hadn't just changed the story. She was rewriting the ending for countless others, and she was just getting started. The weeks turned into months, and the atmosphere inside Vantage Tech was no longer recognizable from the days when Ava had first walked through those doors. The walls that had once echoed with quiet prejudice now buzzed with intentionality, accountability, and transformation. But behind the success was a woman who carried not just ambition, but the weight of legacy and the shadows of pain still too fresh. Late one evening, Ava remained alone in her office. Most of the building had emptied, save for the hum of custodial carts and the soft flicker of exit signs. She stared at the wall across from her desk where she'd hung a single-framed photo. Her grandmother, born in the Deep South, denied education, fired for speaking too boldly. Silenced, but never broken, Ava touched the glass gently. "They still don't see us, Grandma, but now they have to listen." The next morning, Ava stood at the heart of Vantage Tech's newest development, a tech incubator for underserved youth. The space was modern: glass walls, smart boards, labs, and 3D printing hubs. But the soul of it was simple: access. A young black girl approached her timidly, maybe 15, braids neatly done, laptop under her arm. "Ms. Brooks," she whispered. Ava knelt to her level. "Call me Ava. What's your name?" "Naya," she said. "I've never been in a place like this. I didn't even know I could belong here." Ava smiled, brushing a strand of Naya's hair aside. "You don't just belong. One day, you'll run places like this. And when you do, pull up chairs for the ones behind you." Naya nodded. In her eyes, Ava saw herself. But outside those walls, the world didn't pause. A media blog leaked old footage from Ava's first day. The video of her being ignored and mocked in the lobby. It went viral. Again, #SkirtedButCEO began trending. Some tried to turn it into a joke. She only got the job because of her husband. She's making the workplace uncomfortable for men. She's turning the company into a social experiment. But the world pushed back. Voices rose in defense. She earned it. "I stayed in a job that belittled me for years. She's doing what we all wish we could." She's not a social experiment. She's a revolution. Meanwhile, inside the company, a secret was unraveling. Ava's reforms had brought transparency. But with that came exposure, and not all of it welcome. One of the largest divisions, the data infrastructure unit, had been quietly cooking performance metrics for years, promoting friends, hiding failures, undermining competitors. And now, the whistleblowers were knocking on Ava's door. "There's more," one of them said, sliding a drive across the table. "These numbers go back 5 years, including Julian's former CTO, your husband's best friend." Ava froze. This wasn't just a test of leadership. It was a test of love. That night, Ava sat across from Julian at their dining room table. The house was quiet. The city shimmered beyond their windows. "He knew?" she asked. Julian looked tired. He rubbed his temples, then nodded slowly. "Not all of it, but enough. He thought he was protecting the company." Ava stared down at a glass of wine. "And what are we protecting now?" Julian reached across the table. "The truth, no matter how ugly. We built this company for people who had never been let in. That mission doesn't change, even if it costs us everything." The next week, Ava took the stage at a press conference. Calm, resolved. In the pursuit of transparency, we uncovered unethical practices, ones that existed long before my arrival. These behaviors will be investigated fully. No one is above accountability, not even those closest to me. Reporters fired questions. Some aimed to twist her words. Others leaned in, stunned. But Ava was unshaken. "You don't lead with comfort. You lead with courage. And we will lead forward." In the weeks that followed, the CTO resigned and issued a public apology. Ava oversaw the internal investigation herself. Several board members, once skeptics, now back to fully. Employees who had been overlooked were invited to submit leadership proposals directly to Ava's office, and 3 were hired on the spot. One Friday, as she exited the building, Ava saw a new intern holding the elevator door for a janitor. "Good afternoon, sir," the intern said, smiling. Ava didn't say a word. She just watched, heart full, because that was a culture she'd been building. Later that weekend, Ava returned to the neighborhood she grew up in. She walked the cracked sidewalks, past the school where counselors once told her, "You should aim for something more realistic." Past the corner store where she'd seen her mother cry over rent. Past the playground where she'd written her first dreams in a journal. And when she stopped at a community center, she slipped a folder into the administrator's hand. Inside, papers detailing a scholarship program for black girls in tech. Fully funded. No strings. "Start with 10, she said. "Then 20. The woman blinked. "What do we call it?" Ava smiled. "The Ava Brooks Legacy Fund." Because this was no longer just her story. It was a story of every woman who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, laughed at, and still rose. The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of the Vantage Tech headquarters, casting golden light on the marble floors where it all began, the same lobby where Ava Brooks had once been ignored, skirted, and humiliated. Now, she stood before a crowd of reporters, employees, and partners, preparing to announce her most personal and powerful initiative yet. It had been 1 year since she became Director of Strategic Inclusion, 1 year since the world began to witness not just her rise, but the shaking of a system that had long needed to fall. Behind her were banners that read, "From Margin to Power, the Ava Brooks Foundation for Equity and Innovation." Ava stepped up to the microphone, not as the wife of the CEO, not as the woman who had been mistaken for a delivery worker, but as a builder of legacy. "I've spent the last year confronting the system from within," she said. "Now, I'm expanding the fight beyond these walls." She outlined the foundation's pillars. Fully funded scholarships for black and brown girls in tech across underserved communities. Nationwide mentorship programs pairing young women with executives in STEM and business. A venture capital fund to back minority-led startups with no access to generational wealth. And a reform index, publicly ranking Fortune 500 companies on equity, culture, and access. Every word she spoke was received not with polite applause, but with thunderous standing ovation. Later that day, Ava walked quietly through the hallways of the company that had once tried to break her. Every floor now bore the fingerprints of a leadership. Diverse teams, equity-based promotions, mentoring networks, cultural holidays respected and honored. As she stepped into the elevator, she was joined by Naya, the teenage girl she had met at the tech incubator months ago. Now an intern in the coding department, her badge proudly hung around her neck. "Ms. Brooks, can I tell you something?" Naya asked. "Of course." "My mom told me she used to pray that people like us would finally be seen." She said, "Maybe not in my time, but someday. I think you're a someday." Ava blinked away the emotion rising in her throat. She reached over and squeezed Naya's hand. "No. You're her someday. I'm just making sure you get there faster." That night, as the city lights blinked outside their penthouse window, Julian and Ava stood on their balcony, arms wrapped around each other. "You really did it," Julian whispered. "You turned pain into power." Ava leaned her head against his chest. "No, I turned silence into a movement." Julian pulled her close. "What now?" She looked up at the stars above. "Now I teach others how to take the MIC." The headlines the next morning read, "She was ignored in the lobby. Now, she's changing the nation." Ava Brooks, from skirted to supreme. Legacy has a new face. And somewhere in a small town, a little black girl read Ava's name on a tablet at school and whispered to herself, "One day, that'll be me." Because Ava didn't just change a company. She changed the standard. She proved that when you give a black woman power, she doesn't just rise. She lifts the world with her.